Hi, I'm Alexandra Scherzer, and welcome to today's interview of Blooming into Motherhood. I'm sitting here with Tara Blair Ball, and I'm so happy that all of you have joined us here today for this interview. I want to start off by acknowledging everybody who's tuning in today for showing up, for being curious about elevating your own wellness and your own well-being, whatever that might look like for you. And I want to thank you for taking the time and energy for investing in yourself to learn more about resources that exist around you and information that might help you set up a strong and solid framework for you to enter into and then grow as a mother. So thank you, Tara Blair Ball, for coming on today and speaking with us. Tara is a certified relationship coach. She is also a writer, and she specializes in helping clients foster happy, healthy relationships. So a perfect fit for us here at Blooming into Motherhood. Thank you, Tara, for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So together we are going to dive into a big topic. We're going to be speaking about relationships and communication between couples, specifically after starting a family. So let's start with a common theme here that we're seeing at Blooming into Motherhood. We are speaking a lot about how entering into and then continuing on in motherhood is really like a journey. And I would say that this is so true for us, the individual, but also for our relationship. When we bring home a baby and we start a family, the couple's relationship sets itself on its own journey and takes a shift from where we were prior to that time. So before we get into any specific communication skills with our significant other, let's start by taking this landscape view of our relationship. I know that in your work, you talk about the natural ebbs and flows in a couple's relationship. So feeling connected may feel strong one day and less so a couple weeks later. And it's just a natural course of how things will go. So whether we're expecting a first baby, whether we're in the full swing of toddlerhood, or our kids are a bit older, could you speak to as to what is expected, considered to be normal ups and downs in a relationship?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So it's very important to recognize that in any kind of long-term relationship, that love ends up being very much a choice on a daily basis. Love needs to be full of intentional acts. So when we're navigating new parenthood, we're dealing with not only a new human that we're raising and trying to make sure that they don't like hurt themselves on a regular basis, but also just navigating differences with their partner, whether it's communication issues, differences in parenting styles, differences in values and how we raise the children, having to be really clear about new communication needs as well as conflict resolution techniques. But on a day-to-day basis, it's going to be difficult to feel that in love feeling. So butterflies and romance, when you're covered in vomit, when you're sleep deprived, when you're irritated with your partner because you may have been taken on some more tasks than them. That's where the love is a choice aspect comes into it, and is really important, is recognizing that you guys are sort of in the thick of it. This is your partner. You guys are sort of you're on the same journey. You're walking beside each other. And that if you're going to choose to continue to value and maintain that relationship, it is in making those choices on a regular basis to stick with them, even when you're not feeling those happy butterflies or totally in love with them. But that's where love is different than being in love. You're not going to feel in love with your partner every day when life is just hard, but you are going to be have love for your partner when you're able to continue to make those choices and to be able to see them show up for you in the same way.
Yeah, I completely agree that when we have things like vomit all over you, it's hard to see the whole landscape at that moment, because inevitably that's what's taking all of your attention at that moment. So keeping in this whole landscape view of things, are there some broad strokes that couples can really take an honest look at and evaluate so that they can set themselves up to be on track or stay on this healthier relationship in that space.
It can definitely be important to discuss in the beginning of a relationship, right before having children, or once you've had children, is what are the different expectations around raising kids? What I see a lot with couples that ends up being a problem is that, one person might have very traditional roles of parenting, as in, the woman in a heterosexual relationship takes on most of the parenting roles, but then she's not really able to fulfill those because on top of that, she's a working mom and working just as much as the father. So if you have those sort of different roles, it'd be important to communicate those in the beginning. Like, what are your expectations? Are those expectations realistic from the life that we're planning on living together, and the life that we are living together? So having communication about that is important. I also definitely recommend couples have conversations about how can we manage our self-care time as new parents. There's a lot of misguided beliefs about what self-care is, especially for women. Like, self-care is not taking a shower. Self-care is not going to the grocery store. Those are just basic needs. Like, self-care is like having 2 hours to yourself to read a book or go to a coffee shop or, take a walk. Like, self-care is more than just these basic needs. And how do we know what self-care we need? And how do we communicate to our partner that we need it? And how are we able to let our partner know that we need that and let them honor that and also give that to our partner as well? Self-care, having conversations about that is so important to make sure that each parent has the opportunity to get what they need so they can be a better partner, a better parent, a better human, all of that. Another thing is, like, how are you going to continue romance? Romance can fall off the table for a lot of couples because the children become prioritized, or you're sharing beds with children, or, someone's, one parent's nursing or breastfeeding or taking on primarily the feeding roles. So what's going to happen for the romance? Like, how will you continue to have a healthy sex life? How will you continue to remember to have date nights, and making that intentional and scheduling those times to make sure you're still having that in a relationship?
Yeah, I think you saying intentional, that's so key, right? To be aware of where you're at and to be intentional about it, and also um to feel okay that what you're aiming for in this season of parenthood will look different than the next or the previous one, because it is all part of the ebbs and flows of parenthood, of our relationship, of the needs, of the time that we can give to these things when we're trying to be intentional about them. So that's a really key point. I'm so happy you brought that up.
Yeah, and just thinking about what you said too, the importance of being creative. Like, when you don't have children, it's really easy to, like, go out to dinner whenever you want. When you add children in the mix, you're having to deal with babysitters, you're paying money for that, plus paying to leave, but you can be creative and have at-home dates, but the important thing is it's an intentional time that you are prioritizing and seeing in that space that way. So even if you're just hanging out at home, it's still you're holding your partner's hand, you're putting away phones, and you're like, this is our date time. So I think that's important, to be open to being creative and less closed-minded about how things need to look, because things are going to be different for some time.
Right. And certainly what date night might have been before kids is just not going to look the same. And even if it looks the same, it won't feel the same, because as you said, you're coming back to a babysitter, restaurant time. There's all kinds of other things going on, even if you do the exact same activity. So
Right.
that's good to keep in mind too.
Right.
So that was sort of like the broad strokes and the landscape view. Let's get into some specifics. I know that you speak about something that's really in line with how I speak to some parents that I'm working with. And an easy go-to is to begin the sentences when you're expressing yourself to your significant other, expressing your feelings to them, starting with I and not starting with you. You can often make the other person go, oh, and sort of get defensive, and it will sound like a criticism. I is much more open sounding. But I know that you speak to so many about so many other examples of what quick wins could look like or be for some couples in a relationship, even just small tweaks that they can do to stay on or get on to a better path. So what would some of those be?
So one would be focusing on the problem instead of whoever committed the problem. So one example would be, instead of saying like, you didn't do the dishes, being like, the dishes haven't really been getting done very regularly this week. And that way you're not placing blame, you're not accusing, you're just pointing out a fact, which is the dishes aren't getting done as reasonably. Because the important thing is that we are not getting into a mentality of me versus my partner, because then that ends up like you guys are enemies. And you guys have to be a team to have a sustaining relationship. So it's got to be me and my partner versus the problem. And in this case, the problem is the dishes aren't getting done. It doesn't matter who is supposed to do them in this instance, but that's the problem. Another thing that I've suggested to couples is they make up an imaginary person to blame things on. This was very, very successful for my husband and me during COVID, particularly because we were trapped in the house. We have 4 children from 16 to now 1. So we're very much dealing with a lot of different ages, a lot of different struggles, with all of us being at home, all of us having the kids not having school, all that kind of stuff. So having a person to blame things on was just sort of a funny way to point something out. So in our family, it was Rick. So if the kids didn't put away their toys, it was Rick's fault. Like Rick hasn't put away his toys. Like, we need to help Rick put away the toys, don't we? And Rick didn't do the dishes today. Like, it sort of was just a way to just, again, point out the problem. And I'm not blaming, I'm not accusing. And it was for my family in particular, and for many couples that have then used it, it's just been funny. And that's the important thing, is just having a sense of humor, because parenthood is hard and it's not always going to feel more than just drudgery. But that any time we can sort of make light of the situation can help us feel more connected, and like it's less hard.
I think that's great. I'd actually not heard that before. Yeah,
Mhm.
adding, even just hearing you say it, I mean, it makes me laugh.
Yeah, exactly. Mhm.
So it can certainly help to ease the feelings about the situation and then just focus on the solution. And I love how you said that you're really supposed to be working towards a team. You're a team player, and it's sort of like not me versus you, but us versus the issues, the problems, everything that's in front of us, and how do we find together those solutions.
Mhm.
So that's really great. I especially love that second example.
Yeah.
So, when we're looking at conversations that are tense or filled with negative emotions, when they're not using those tips about blaming Rick or whatever the case may be, a big source of the stress after having kids has to do with managing all the added responsibilities, the added time constraints, the lack of sleep. And, you said it best just now, kids ranging from 16 to 1. I mean, the needs just in that is really wide reaching. And there's a lot of demands made on parents emotionally, physically. So what would you tell a mother who's feeling that, let's say, the division of labor in the house isn't feeling fair? Maybe it's related about kids or housework or just managing everything. What would your suggestion be?
So, Allison Downey, Allylson, and Downey is Downey. If you just look up Allison Downey domestic labor division worksheet, she provides free worksheets at her website that I use with clients. What it has is a list of duties or tasks that go along with taking care of the home, as well as taking care of babies versus children, since those are all different tasks. What I suggest with my clients is they either come up with their own sort of list of all the activities in the home, or they use Allison Downey's worksheets because they're already sort of there. What I find more often than not is that we just as humans always overestimate how much we give in a situation. We always think we give so much, and in reality, we may or may not, right? And when we see all of the tasks that go into a home and raising children, we might actually see that there's more that we could step up for, or that there's maybe some things we need to give up or delegate in a different way. So what I see a lot for partners is that there's a lot of behind the scenes tasks that are taken on usually by one partner over the other. And so they're taking on more of the emotional labor of the raising, the taking care of the family. And so that partner is more usually tired. For one, it's really exhausting taking care of all of that, as well as getting resentful and bitter. And that resentment can be a big relationship killer. But having something outlined of, I'm going to do these tasks and you're going to do these tasks. And we're going to come to an agreement about what makes sense for us. And I think it's very important for couples to be able to negotiate that and be assertive on what they're willing and willing not to do. And then once you have that sheet, for one, you can't then criticize or scold your partner for not doing it the way you think that they should do it, right? Like, because then why would they want to do it, period? The other part, there should be a reasonable amount of time for them to complete it. And if you are asking them, 2 or 3 times, have you done it? Then you're kind of taking on that task yourself, because here you are then managing your partner. So you either need to let go and let your partner handle their task when they're supposed to, or you should be the one to take on that task and see if your partner will take on another task as well. I also, with some partners where we have stay-at-home parents, it's very important that they have conversations about division of labor, because there's this idea that a stay-at-home parent should take on all of the household duties, as well as all the child rearing duties. And rarely is that fair. And that's so much exhausting for the parent and just not, it's really going to hurt and hamper relationship happiness if that stays a thing. So, all the people that would be doing household duties that you would hire would be, a nanny, a housekeeper, a lawn boy, an accountant, all those are 4 different jobs, if not more, to just be a stay-at-home parent. Mm-hmm. So it's very important that the stay-at-home parent realize that they're doing just as important labor as whoever is financially providing for the family. Mm-hmm. And being able to still negotiate that. In my marriage today, which is we divide very equitably, we both trade off who does parenting and then who does our domestic tasks through the house, and the things that we cannot do, like we don't clean our house super regularly, we hire outside help for those kind of things. So finding alternatives or solutions is a way that we've been able to balance that. So neither one of us is getting resentful or upset in that situation. But it's all about negotiating and working through that, because it can really hurt a relationship. And 80% of divorces are initiated by women. And I would say a lot of it could be because of domestic labor issues and feeling not appreciated for their labor in the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think a key point in what you're speaking about right now is that before the baby arrives, before we start a family, we have a certain amount of time and we have a certain amount of responsibilities. And as we've said, then in the family life, there's just a lot more. And so your time is less. All the other responsibilities stayed the same as they were before. Plus there's a whole new set of responsibilities. So just even acknowledging this, and really standing in that space where you're open to changing some of those habits, right, that weren't there and in place beforehand, but may need to shift definitely once a baby arrives and once a family starts to grow. And then certainly that list is going to be sent out actually in the email that, not the list, but the list you referred to about the worksheet will be linked in the email today, so that people can make use of that, because I think that's a great tool. I've checked it out myself. And yeah, I think that another key point that you were referring to is just to be able to be open to those changes as they come, right? So the responsibilities and the time and everything related to a baby might be looking different than the next stage, and then the next stage after that, or if you add a second baby. So all of this might change, but remaining a team, looking at things, laying things out on the table, and taking account of acknowledging now there's this, right? Us versus the situation, and then how we divide it. I think that's really, really key take home message here.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you have anything else to add. I did want to ask you about one. I came across one Instagram post, and I think that this is a lot of your work revolves around some of this, which is you outline about 6 or 7 points
Mhm.
or traits that healthy relationships have. So I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, because I found that, really nice and clear and sort of all packaged up nicely in terms of where we might be wanting to get to if we don't feel we're in that space.
Yeah. So healthy couples really come from a place of open minded curiosity about our partner and about our relationship. So, that involves being able to ask instead of assume about our partner, being able to ask, like, are you mad at me? Instead of being like, oh, they're totally mad at me and making it about ourselves, like being able to have those conversations and being open and comfortable having those conversations. Other aspects of healthy couples that we see is they, as I mentioned earlier, they focus on the problem instead of criticizing. Instead of saying you're so thoughtless because you didn't do the dishes, being able to say, like, hey, the dishes aren't getting done. Like, what can we do? We, being important, do to help make sure the dishes are getting done more regularly. Being able to, you know, respond to criticism or respond to complaints, really respond to complaints from our partner without getting defensive, like being able to take that step back to listen to our partner, and hear what's actually being said versus what we make up is being said. And that's a really helpful tip, is learning in our communication to say things like, what I'm making up is, or what I'm hearing is, because what we hear may not be what's actually our partner is actually trying to say to us. And we could be filtering it through our own sort of self messages. Um, Further, healthy couples, they set up times to connect and be romantic, which is definitely, as I mentioned earlier, just so important as new parents, is remembering that this is the person that you fell in love with, and that once life gets hard, you have to continue to maintain and work towards building that love. So setting up date nights, having, relationship check-ins where you ask each other, like, how is it going? Healthy couples also practice appreciating one another. And that's so important as new parents. Just saying, thank you for changing the baby's diaper. Thank you for taking out the trash, whatever it might be. We will always get resentful if we feel like we're doing a lot of effort or work and we're not getting appreciated for it. So appreciation ends up being a really important thing in a relationship. And it's so easy. I mean, it takes a couple seconds to say, thank you for doing that. It really does. Or I really love seeing how you are with our son or daughter. Being able to say that and share that with our partner. And I think those are the majority of them. Taking time to communicate, taking time to connect. Conflict resolution will always be one that couples need to work through. And I talk with a lot with couples about this. I have a workshop coming up for couples to learn how to fight in a healthy way. But if fighting involves regularly name calling, yelling, screaming, threatening to break up or divorce, bringing up past incidents, blaming, lots of you statements. Those all go into ineffective fighting that usually doesn't get resolved and ends up being perpetual. So learning some healthier fighting skills is really important. And I teach that in my workshop coming up, and in a lot of my Instagram posts too, just how to fight which really ends up being how to communicate in a clear way, and how to do that instead of what a lot of us have grown up with, honestly.
Right. That's a great list. And actually, I'll share that Tara has a wonderful Instagram page with lots of what we're talking about today in a really visual, bite-sized, sort of easy to understand, apply way. So if that interests you, definitely check out her Instagram feed. And she's also on TikTok. So as we're wrapping up here, is there anything that you'd like to leave the listeners with as a last take home message, or if there was anything that we sort of skimmed over that you wanted to circle back to and elaborate on? I'll give you a minute to see if there's anything before we wrap up.
Mine's actually connected to my free gift.
Sure.
Or my
Okay, so let's talk about
yeah.
that.
Yeah. So, as a parent and as someone who works with couples all of the time, I came up with the term of rituals of love. And this is something that you do with your partner no matter what. And as new parents, as people working and changing in their parenting journey, rituals of love become even more important because they're the way that you continue to stay connected, continue to build your connection, as well as repair and reconnect after regrettable incidents. We'll say that instead of fights, which it may or may not be. So, examples of rituals of love are things that you can consistently do no matter what. So, even if you're sleep deprived, even if you're mad at your partner, even if you aren't physically around each other at this time. So, these can be really small, and I think that's the important aspect of it. Of these could be making them coffee every morning, saying I love you at the end of all texts or phone calls, giving each other a hug or kiss goodbye. And my offer gives more information about what these are, the research behind the benefits of these, as well as ways to come up with yours for your specific relationship, like what makes sense for you. You are likely already doing some. Many couples already are, but the important thing is that you continue it and sustain it even through these tough times, because these will literally help bring you across to the better times, right? And help you sustain that. So those rituals of love can sort of help build the bridge between the two. So my offer provides our listeners like just how to do that for their relationship and the value of that.
That's great. That sounds like a really valuable offer that you've put together. And it's linked to everybody who's listening. It's linked to the email where you found this interview, and it's actually going to be just below this screen. So thank you so much, Tara, for joining us today and taking some time to share some of your insights about communication, particularly after starting a family with the listeners. I want to just remind all the listeners that you are receiving one interview from one of these wonderful experts every day in your inbox. So be sure to check it daily. And thank you again, Tara. And we will see you next time. Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you.